The turn of the 20th century was roaring with changes altering people's relationship to the world around them. While initially prohibitively expensive for most, the automobile promised horseless, comfortable transport for families and individuals at unprecedented speeds, reaching places railroads could never. The arrival of the Model T, an automobile designed to be more affordable to middle-class buyers and tough enough to handle unpaved roads, brought increased numbers of automobile enthusiasts to the streets and trails. Throughout the late 1900s and early 1910s, many motorist groups organized across the United States. They were interested in extending how far they could drive beyond the cities and towns, developing a network of highways that would link together many American landmarks. Most frequently, automobile enthusiasts would promote municipal road improvements with the goal of extending the highway to a distant locale. A frequent target was Yellowstone National Park. For example, Joseph Parmley of South Dakota recruited auto enthusiasts to improve the local road between his town, Ipswich, and the nearby city of Aberdeen, promising a road ultimately connecting the Twin Cities to Yellowstone Park. Welcome to the Rediscover the Winds podcast, a podcast by the Fremont County Museums. With museums in Du Bois, Riverton, and Lander, the Fremont County Museum System is committed to collecting, preserving, and interpreting the stories of Fremont County and the Wind River area. The unique artifacts found at our museums relate the history of central Wyoming, with information which, in many cases, can't be found anywhere else. With the Rediscover the Winds podcast, we hope to bring some of that history to you, wherever you are listening. Last episode, we looked at the railroad in Fremont County. We tracked its inception to its decline. We looked at how the opening of reservation lands triggered the creation of the line from Casper to Lander. We also investigated the connection between the railroad and town sites. This episode will continue with our theme of tourism and travel as we explore the story of automobiles, highways, and tourism in Fremont County. Commonly, these early trails were named. These included the Yellowstone Park Trail, Yellowstone Highway, the National Park to Park Highway, and the Atlantic Yellowstone Pacific Highway. To accompany the colorful names, signs with elaborate logos or images would signify which roadway one was following. However, one of the most simple options was placing yellow painted rocks, marked out with a black arrow or letter H, beside the road, commonly seen near the Yellowstone area. Remnants of these early signs still remain throughout Fremont County, including at the Du Bois Museum, where a small rock still retains its bold H highway marker. However, as exciting as these various road names and logos were to motor tourists, the network of roads was patchy and confusing, particularly as roads converged near Yellowstone.
By the mid-1920s, the government took over administration of the highway system, changing from the named roadways to a numbering convention.
While less flashy, the numbered system was easier for motorists navigating cross-country. The arrival of the automobile was immediately of interest to residents of Fremont County. With no railroad access, residents who wanted to navigate into the upper country faced a long, dusty, and difficult journey on horseback or by wagon. Automobiles and a connected roadway system would greatly increase access for all throughout the county, and greatly improve the ease of moving goods and people even up the rugged mountain areas. J.B. Oakey, sometimes referred to as the Sheep King of the area, was one of Fremont County's most successful residents. He was among the first people to bring an automobile to the area in 1906, and by the 1910s, motor cars appeared sporadically. Motorists were already reaching Du Bois in the northwest corner of the county. One ranch 6 miles above Du Bois, stewarded by outfitter and hunter's guide Frank Miller, was heralded as, quote, the logical destination of automobilists headed for the Yellowstone National Park. Notably, this 1910s advertisement was produced prior to good road access across Togetee Pass and before automobiles were permitted in Yellowstone National Park, so these automobilists must have been very enterprising. These early automobile pioneers correctly predicted what was to come, despite the difficulty in their passage. Roadways, particularly highways, would soon form the backbone of Fremont County.
Once the automobile had been established as an indispensable method of travel, much focus was put on improving the roads that crossed Wyoming.
Originally built as a military road around 1903, the initial Fremont County Trail led from Fort Washakie through Yellowstone National Park. The road was designed to follow the path of least resistance over the mountainous terrain, with motorists encountering grades as steep as 23%. As part of the Yellowstone Highway effort, roads that ran through the county were slowly improved, widened, and eventually paved. Many of these efforts continue today. Over time, road standards changed. New sections of the road were cut to be flatter, more direct, and wider. Building better roads over mountain passes was an even greater challenge. By 1900, there was a crude trail that crossed from the Du Bois area into the Jackson Hole region. However, despite adventurous automobilists, the road was in no state for most motorists to attempt a crossing. Surveys were undertaken to ensure that the road was ideally placed in 1917, following the decision to build a proper highway crossing. Two routes were investigated, Cub and Togetee Pass. Cub Pass goes through the Buffalo Fork River Valley, and the surveyor, T.C. Peterson Jr., stated, quote, "Cub Pass is about 400 feet lower than Togetee Pass, and it was thought this route would afford a longer open season. The opinion of local people acquainted with snow conditions was in direct opposition. The slopes west of Cub Pass are heavily timbered and have a northern exposure, while to the west of Togetee Pass, the slopes are on a southern exposure and practically open." Once surveyed, the work began for the roadway in 1919. The road was only 12 to 16 feet wide, but its comparatively easy maximum grade of 8% meant that automobiles could traverse the distance without aid from horses or locking wheels into place. Despite being unpaved and unnavigable much of the year, for summer tourists and residents, traveling between the Wind River Valley and Jackson Hole was now possible. Throughout the next 2 decades, the road was frequently resurveyed and maintained, particularly through the 1930s. New Deal workforces like the Civilian Conservation Corps, also known as CCC, and the Bureau of Public Roads were enlisted to improve Forest Service and National Park roads, including the highway across Togetee Pass. By the start of the Second World War, most of the road had been given a hard surface, and many sections were graded for easier driving, meeting modern road standards of width and grade. As the highways through the county were expanded, road work was a frequently available job opportunity. Some communities did their own road work, such as the tie hacks working in the upper Wind River Valley, who laid out roads still in use around the National Forest area to access tie cutting areas and camps. Others entered the area through road work jobs. The constant reworking of Togetee Pass demanded labor, and that included Augusta Gussie Oliver. Prior to moving up to the pass, Gussie had been working on a road crew in Muddy Gap, east of Jeffrey City. Caring for her young daughter alone, Gussie disguised herself as a man to get the job, driving a team of horses on a slip crew grading roads. Atop Togetee Pass, she met Einar Anderson, who had bladed half of the pass and was driving freight from Du Bois with a horse team. The two were married under a pine tree and honeymooned on a pack trip. Demand for better roads came not only from the increasing number of tourists driving through the county, but also from its own residents. The first year the state of Wyoming issued license plates, 1913, more than 1,500 vehicles registered. Today, there are almost as many vehicles registered in Wyoming as there are residents. In Fremont County, registered vehicles outnumber residents by around 5,000. Automobiles proved immediately more flexible in moving people and things between far-flung towns. Often, older models were transformed for other uses. Tie hacks working in the Shoshone National Forest would purchase old Model T cars, drive them up into the woods as far as they would go, and strip the engines for use in sawmills in the 1930s and 40s. Other automobiles were repurposed into tractors, and out of the post-World War II surplus of Jeeps came adaptations for farm equipment and even rural fire engines. Many residents are proud to display their Wyoming license plates as a badge of their state of residence. In their first years of issue, Wyoming plates were plain with a new color each year. Prior to 1930, license plates were not designated per county, but rather for the entire state. In 1929, over 50,000 plates were issued across the state, and the system was ready for a change. Counties took over sale of license plates, and the county numbering system was introduced. Each plate would start with its county number, followed by up to 4 digits. The numbers for each of Wyoming's 23 counties were designated based on the assessed value of each county's possible resources, and Fremont County landed near the middle with the number 10. The issuance of the 1930 plates also solidified the preference for low numbers on Wyoming plates. The 1930 issue had 4 possible numbers in its plate combination, so almost 10,000 plates could be issued per county. Many early settlers and automobilists prided themselves on acquiring low numbers on their plates, and even today, many families will keep these low plate numbers and pass them down. A low plate number acts as a sign of a family's long residence in their given county. Even today, the 2025 reissue of Wyoming plates is accounting for this tradition. While most license plates are transitioning from up to 5 digits in addition to the county number to up to 3 digits and a letter, low Wyoming plate numbers have been reserved for their current holders. Certain plate numbers are sometimes even written into wills, ensuring that the family will keep their plate even as their current holders pass on. In 1936, a second and equally recognizable change was made to Wyoming plates. In the face of frequent fraud, the Secretary of State, Lester C. Hunt, decided to add another element to the plate to make it more difficult to imitate. The story of the now trademarked bucking horse and rider design is subject to much controversy as to its origins and who it depicts. The iconic silhouette has multiple connections to Fremont County. In 1934, the branding iron bar was built in Du Bois. Les Wright, one of the owners of the bar, stated, quote, "I drew the outline of a bucking horse and rider with chalk on a piece of tank steel and had a mechanic cut it out with a torch." Wright was well acquainted with Hunt, the Secretary of State, who requested several pictures of his outline. Ultimately, however, Hunt did not go with Wright's original outline and instead had artist Alan True design his own version of the silhouette. In writing to the Archives, Museums, and Historical Department of the state, Hunt indicated that he did not have any specific horse, even steamboat, in mind for the design of the image. However, Hunt stated outright for the cowboy he had in mind, Stub Farlow, a cowboy and rodeo rider of Lander, who he said was, quote, "the most typical cowboy I know. He represents all that is typical and symbolic of the West." Prior to the issuance of the 1936 license plates, the December 26, 1935 issue of the Wyoming State Journal from Lander clarified the situation, stating, quote, "The rider on your new 1936 license plate represents A.J. Stub Farlow of Lander. Farlow was the son of E.J. Farlow, whose ranch was outside of Lander and who was an early settler in the area." After the 1936 plate, every subsequent Wyoming license plate has included the bucking horse and rider image. Moving across the state necessitated more than just good, extensive roadways. Crucial to the automobile was gasoline to fuel it and mechanics to conduct any repairs necessary on a long journey. A network of service stations cropped up around the country, and Fremont County was no exception. Filling stations advertised their brand of oil clearly atop gas pumps, and pumped by the station attendants. At the Du Bois Museum, Swan's service station exemplifies these small filling stations with gas pumps out front and the service station providing oil checks and replacements from the back. Beyond these bare-bones provisions, however, filling stations began to fill other needs for tourists, encouraging brand loyalty. Oil companies developed travel bureaus to inform drivers about expected road conditions and provide travel advice and brochures. Some, such as Conoco, developed large maps of the United States, offering proposed routes for tourists driving cross-country, highlighting scenic routes, points of interest, towns to visit, and, of course, filling stations that provided the company's oil. Motorists would write to the company with their desired destination and receive detailed state-by-state maps with a highlighted proposed route. Businesses also used the travel maps as a means of advertising, including dude ranches. Several Du Bois area dude ranches were placed on the Conoco Tour Aid, meaning that long before the days of GPS, dudes could get exact directions to their ranch destination. Dude ranches were deeply affected by the rise and dominance of auto tourism. The Upper Wind River Valley was an ideal place for dude ranches to develop in the late 1910s and 1920s. Isolated from the railroad and trappings of larger cities, and positioned close to Yellowstone National Park, the area brought the Wild West to visitors. However, the railroad was essential for visitors, transporting them close enough to the ranches to be taken by ranch employees to their final destination. As automobiles became more common for visitors to the area, their interests changed. The rugged lifestyle of dude ranches became less appealing,
with many ranches which survived the explosion of auto tourists offering more modern comforts and shorter stays to suit changing tastes.
At the start of the 1930s, for every one open-top car, 9 hard-top vehicles were sold. The growing crowds of motorists wanted to drive and stay comfortable in conditions, and the tourist industry they attracted needed to adapt to these new demands. Northwestern Wyoming is perhaps best known for its national parks, and even in the past, this was the case. Famously, Yellowstone was America's first national park, notable for its spectacular and unusual thermal features. After the turn of the 20th century, the rise of the automobile presented a challenge to the overseers of the parks. Initially, it was decided that motor cars would be banned from the interior of Yellowstone National Park. Visitors were, instead, confined to coaches and other horse-driven transport. However, the 1915 establishment of the National Park Service brought with it a new director, Stephen Mather. Mather recognized the potential of automobile tourists, and one of his first official acts was to admit motor cars into the national parks. So 1916 was the first year that Yellowstone National Park officially admitted automobiles within its gates. Nearly 3,500 automobiles drove through the gates in that first year. Motor cars offered serious advantages within the national parks. There was less wear and tear on the roads, and dust could be better controlled. Tourists preferred to travel independently, which was not possible in carriages containing large groups, and distances were traversed more quickly, meaning that more wilderness could be left throughout the park. Driving quickly became the preferred method for visiting Yellowstone National Park, with a number of highways connecting to its various entrances. Rather than confining entry to those who could take the train and contract carriages, many tourists began bringing their own automobiles, and visitation to Yellowstone rapidly increased, growing from slightly over 50,000 in 1915 to almost 80,000 in 1920. By 1929, visitors to Yellowstone had nearly tripled. Almost 80% of visitors arrived by automobile, while a paltry 18% came by rail. The automobile was here to stay. Driving cross-country had more effects than forcing horse teams out of the national parks and reducing railroad travel. Automobile travel encourages drivers to decide their own routes, and quickly a camping culture emerged. Tourists no longer were confined to specific stops and hotels, and instead campgrounds sprung up in many towns on the way to Yellowstone. Businesses soon took notice of the popularity of municipal campgrounds and established cabins with modern amenities, building small cabins to retain the sense of camping out. These cottage camps and motor courts remained popular from the 1930s through the end of World War II. Individual buildings went out of fashion as the rooms were instead strung together to establish motels, built facing the road to attract the most attention possible. In the DuBois area, there are still many campgrounds and motels that were originally established in this period, including the Twin Pines Lodge, Riggs Motel, now the Black Bear Inn, and the Branding Iron Motel, courting the new motor tourists on their way towards the national parks. With growing traffic on the roads leading up to Yellowstone, more attention started to be paid to the national forests and their plentiful resources, both to the local population and visitors. Roads built through the forest with funding from federal New Deal agencies improved access even further, and recreational visits to the national forests expanded. Demand induced the forest to build up campgrounds and improve access roads. Following World War II, Army surplus Jeeps and later purpose-built off-road vehicles encouraged motorists to reach even deeper into the forest. The ample hunting opportunities, particularly the ranging areas for highly desired bighorn sheep, and the rise of snowmobiles in the 1960s extended the recreational use of Shoshone National Forest to 3 out of the 4 seasons. Despite the heavy recreational interest in the forest, Shoshone National Forest did not begin to make long-term plans regarding recreational demands until the late 1950s. The automobile has only expanded opportunities and access for visitors to the national forest, where today, four-wheelers and snowmobiles cross vast swaths of the territory. Access to the Wind River Valley and throughout Fremont County has been undeniably shaped by automobiles. From early motor cars opening access for locals into the area to developing a highway system for easier travel, the motor car introduced the Wind River area as a place for tourists to access Yellowstone and the other side of the Continental Divide. The history of tourism in Fremont County rides on the history of the motor car.
That's it for this episode of the Rediscover the Winds podcast.
Next episode will focus on Depression-era projects as we continue with our theme of tourism and travel. Rediscover the Winds, a Wyoming history podcast, is brought to you in part by the Wind River Cultural Centers Foundation. The WRCCF is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping Fremont County museums preserve our Wyoming and Wind River cultural and natural history by directly supporting the efforts of the Du Bois Museum, the Pioneer Museum and Lander, and the Riverton Museum. To learn more, visit www.windriverccf.com and help us conserve our past while enriching our present. Thank you.